Mr. Speaker, as with Liberals in the past, Bill C-71 targets legal and responsible gun owners while doing nothing to combat the criminal and unauthorized possession of firearms, or to address gang violence or to combat crime in Canada. The lack of focus on crime is particularly frustrating for everyday Canadians who have felt helpless as crime with increasing violence has become a crisis in rural communities, as it has in Lakeland. It also shows how out of touch the Liberals are with rural Canadians who legally own firearms and need them for, say, protecting livestock and pets from predators, or for humane euthanasia of livestock suffering from fatal catastrophic illness or injury when a vet is hours and miles away. For example, on March 5th, the cougar attacked a group of farm animals at a rural Comox Valley property, killing a lamb and injuring a donkey. The owner called RCMP and then shot at the cougar. And that predator subsequently ran away. These are the everyday uses that farmers and that rural Canadians in remote communities use their firearms for. Responsible firearms owners in Lakeland have seen what Liberal predecessors did with the creation of the Long Gun Registry that treated law-abiding firearms-owning men and women as suspicious and nefarious by default, and they've been bracing for legislation similar to C-71 to be introduced. It epitomizes the Liberals' approach of swinging blindly at an issue, in this case the real and serious problems of the unauthorized possession of guns and gang violence and actual gun crimes, and instead only penalizes those who have done nothing wrong. Constituents in Lakeland are disappointed but not surprised that the Liberals missed the mark so badly. Tyler Milligan, a proud gun owner who enjoys going hunting with his grandkids, says this: "As a very active hunter and a competition shooter, I feel this bill is an attack on law-abiding gun owners, and I feel that this bill is not targeting issues that Canada has related to guns. It's clear this legislation was created by individuals who have no experience with law-abiding gun owners and no understanding of the legitimate use and need for firearms in rural and remote communities, or of those for whom firearms are culturally and socially significant, representative of pioneering and Western heritage or treasured family heirlooms." And C-71 is yet another broken promise. The Liberal election platform said they would take pragmatic action to make it harder for criminals to get and to use handguns and assault weapons in crimes, but law-abiding firearm owners' guns aren't on the streets. They're safely secured and locked up in safes and cabinets, or they're on the range or in the fields with their owners. These people are not criminals. They should not be penalized for their choices to hunt or to sport shoot. These Liberals are repeating history and showing they've learned nothing from the mistakes of past Liberal governments that were expensive and burdensome when it comes to the legal possession of firearms in Canada, while ineffective on actually addressing criminal use of guns. Bill C-71 also gives an indication of planned prohibitions to come. I get the strong sense that while the Liberals are trying to reassure Canadians by saying they're not banning anything today, C-71 sets out a framework to implement bans in the future. Section 12.9 does not explicitly state who will make the determination of which firearms could be added to a restricted list and under what legislative authority. It's also not clear if there will be any sort of appeals process or provision should a heavy-handed behind-closed-doors decision without evidence or consultation be made to add a firearm to the list, penalizing law-abiding gun owners. Forgive the skepticism of everyday Canadians, but there have been mistakes made with incorrect firearm classification in the past when there was, at the very least, a check and balance of elected officials. With this power removed, who will be left to ensure that law-abiding firearm owners are not suddenly and immediately criminalized and unfairly targeted by incorrect firearm classification? Anyone who supports civilian oversight of law enforcement should be concerned with C-71. And let's be honest, there's little trust to begin with between law-abiding firearms owners and the Liberals of today. Perhaps the aspect of C-71 I've already heard the most concern about is the creation of a registry in another name, a backdoor registry, under Bill C-71. The Liberal campaign also promised explicitly to not create a new national long gun registry to replace the one that had been dismantled. But under C-71, businesses will be forced to keep a record associating individual people to specific individual firearms. If this isn't a registry, what is? It creates a registry without actually saying so, and firearm owners under this legislation will be issued a reference number by a registrar. What do registrars do? They maintain registries. Canadians know that the long gun registry, which the Conservative government scrapped, was wasteful, ineffective, and did nothing to combat gun violence. It's incredibly disappointing and frustrating for law-abiding gun owners to face new costs, responsibilities, and hurdles when it will do nothing to get illicit firearms off of the streets or to deter or to punish criminals who use firearms in their heinous acts. The Liberals claim C-71 is safety legislation. The public safety minister, though, is cherry-picking statistics to maximize the illusion that the situation in Canada is dire and that this particular legislation is desperately needed. Let me be clear. Conservatives believe strongly in making our country as safe and secure as possible and in taking logical and effective steps to empower law enforcement and to protect vulnerable and innocent Canadians. But let's look at the facts of what the public safety minister could have actually done to make Canada safer. The public safety minister held a guns and gangs summit, but chose not to address gangs in this, what is their apparently flagship legislation. The public safety minister, he has mentioned the insufficient commercial storage of firearms, but he hasn't expanded on the issue and doesn't deal with this issue in Bill C-71, allowing us to debate it. The Liberals have failed to invest in technologies to enhance the ability of the hardworking men and women who serve as border guards to detect and halt illegal guns from the U.S. into Canada. And instead of spending $8.5 million on a skating rink on the hill next door to the largest skating rink in the world, the Rideau Canal, maybe if the Liberals wanted to choose a campaign promise to actually follow through on, they could have provided, as they promised, $100 million per year to provinces and territories to combat illegal gun activity. But C-71 does nothing about any of that. It does nothing to combat gang violence in BC's Lower Mainland, gun violence in the GTA, or the escalating crime rates in rural communities that is making many in my home province of Alberta vulnerable and who feel totally abandoned by the government's slow and inaction on crime. Perhaps the Liberals will listen to Jennifer Quist from Lakeland. She says, people have lost the small-town way of life to constant waves of crime without the punishment. It's the unlawful who run the show around here, the criminals with nothing to lose who win at this game. Such bureaucracy in a time when all we hear about is the way our government is wasting the money of the taxpayer. What the Liberals ignore is that responsible firearm owners across Canada are careful and conscientious. They believe in a culture of safety in the possession and handling of their firearms. They, more than anyone, want stiffer penalties and real action against those who use firearms to commit crimes and against gang activity that put us all at risk. Roy Green gave a good explanation of what law-abiding firearms owners actually do. To legally own a firearm in Canada comes with responsibility. When not in approved use, a trigger lock at least must be engaged on each gun. Ammunition must be stored separately from the gun it's intended for. And separately doesn't mean an ammo box parked beside the firearm. Separately means just that, perhaps a rifle in one room, ammunition in another. Gun owners with children frequently will store their firearms, trigger locks engaged, in a gun safe with ammunition in a locked box some distance away. These are citizens committed to safety who are vetted to ensure they should acquire a firearm, not thugs on the streets who are quite obviously not worried about laws, rules, regulations, or paperwork. I'd like to end by imploring rural members of the Liberal backbench to listen to the common sense concerns they're hearing from their constituents about this legislation. They know as well as I do that this Bill C-71 does nothing to combat criminal activity and illegal possession or use of firearms. Law-abiding gun owners shouldn't be treated as criminals. I hope they will not give in to caucus pressure to vote for this ill-conceived legislation and instead do the right thing and listen to the hunters and the farmers and the sport shooters in their ridings who are not criminals. C-71 should be scrapped. The Liberals should actually listen to everyday Canadians about what it's like to legally own and responsibly handle firearms. They should take action to actually crack down on criminals and to protect the security of innocent Canadians and prevent more victims of crime. Conservatives will not support legislation like that. Hear, hear. And we will continue to be in favor of concrete actions that will actually keep Canadians safe. There are no new measures to combat gang or gun violence in urban areas or to address the serious concerns of escalating and armed crime in rural communities in C-71. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.